Hey everyone, and welcome! I am so incredibly excited to have you here for this explainer. Now, before we really jump in, I want you to close your eyes for just a second. Seriously, just picture where your favorite AI chatbots actually live. You know, when you ask it a question or have it generate a funny image, where is all that heavy lifting happening? You're probably picturing this pristine, super clean, totally invisible network just floating somewhere up in the sky, right? I mean, after all, they do literally call it the cloud. But what actually powers your AI chatbot? I was genuinely fascinated to discover that the cloud isn't a cloud at all. There's no invisible magic here. Every single query you type triggers thousands, sometimes millions, of incredibly power-hungry processing chips. And they live in massive, very real, very physical buildings right down here on Earth. Today, we are going to look at the jaw-dropping physical infrastructure required to make generative AI actually work, and the completely unexpected reality of what's happening right in our very own backyards. Section 1, the physical cost of AI from cloud to ground. Okay, let's dive into this. We are currently right in the middle of an unprecedented race for AI dominance. And the macro scale of the whole thing is just, well, it's staggering. By 2027, big tech companies are projected to spend over $1 trillion on AI infrastructure. $1 trillion. That is literally on par with the entire US defense budget. But to get all those processors up and running, they need one thing above all else: power. Lots and lots of power. Take a second to really think about the number 1.7 gigawatts. That is the proposed power output for the on-site power plant at Stargate, which is one of the largest AI data centers currently being built in rural Texas. To put that completely massive number into perspective, 1.7 gigawatts is enough energy to power more than 1 million homes for an entire year. And all of that power is going to a single facility that's going to end up being larger than Central Park. Now, you might be noticing a pretty stark, frankly surprising contrast here. We constantly hear these incredible utopian promises from tech leaders, right? That AI will eventually cure diseases and even solve climate change through hyper-efficiency. But the physical reality today is a completely different story. Because the industry is building so fast, they just aren't waiting around for renewable energy or nuclear power. They're relying heavily on custom-built natural gas power plants. That Stargate facility I just mentioned, it alone will emit 7.8 million tons of greenhouse gases each year. That's equivalent to the annual emissions of about 2 million cars, just from one site. That brings us to Section 2, in the community's backyard, the local reality. We've talked a lot about the macro data so far, but let's zoom in a bit to the human scale. Because these massive gas-burning power plants aren't just being built out in isolated desert somewhere. They are popping up directly adjacent to residential neighborhoods. Let's look at the lives of the people who suddenly wake up to find these facilities right next door. Take a local resident who goes by OG. She and her husband are military veterans, and they bought their absolute dream property in Abilene, Texas. But then in 2025, Stargate broke ground right next door. Suddenly, there's dust flying everywhere, forcing them to literally change their home's air filters every 2 weeks. And the really heartbreaking part? The community wasn't included at all. They weren't given time to understand the long-term ramifications, and local officials were asked to sign non-disclosure agreements. That meant residents were left completely in the dark, feeling absolutely trapped in their own homes. And this brilliantly illustrates the heartbreak of the situation. Take Crystal Polk's story. She lives right across the street from another giant AI data center, xAI's Colossus in South Haven, Mississippi. The sudden noise and the overwhelming pollution actually forced her to empty her family home of all its furniture. This is the place she grew up in, the place she planned to retire in, her forever home. We are seeing real, physical, human displacement as a direct result of our everyday demand for faster AI tools. Which leads us directly into Section 3, Health Risks of Gas Turbines, Invisible Pollution Made Visible. You know, it's not just the constant noise or the visible dust flying around that's the problem. The real danger is often what you can't even see with the naked eye. When investigative journalists actually flew thermal drones over these data center sites, the footage was absolutely shocking. It revealed massive, intense heat signatures pouring out of dozens of exhaust stacks. These gas turbines operate essentially like jet engines. They run full tilt, nonstop, and generate an enormous amount of fine particulate matter. And that pollution doesn't just magically disappear into the atmosphere. It settles directly over the surrounding neighborhoods. For local communities, especially vulnerable groups like children and the elderly, this creates severe, undeniable health risks. We are talking about major spikes in asthma, severe respiratory issues, cardiovascular problems including heart attacks, and even an increased risk of premature death. And make no mistake, this isn't just one or two rogue facilities skirting the rules. In Texas alone,
There are roughly 80 gigawatts of natural gas power currently under construction. An absolutely astounding 50% of that, literally half of all the new gas power being built in the state, is going entirely off the grid, exclusively to power data centers. This so-called behind-the-meter strategy means massive new power plants are churning out all these pollutants just to feed servers, and absolutely none of that generated electricity is actually benefiting the public grid.
Let's move to Section 4 and see how this builds. Bypassing public permitting, the regulatory loophole. So you might be wondering, how on earth are these massive gigawatt-scale power plants being built without local communities even knowing about them until they're practically turned on? Well, to understand that, we have to look at the regulations, or rather, the loopholes. It all comes down to something called a permit by rule. Originally, this was a lower-level authorization designed for small everyday businesses. Think of your neighborhood auto body shop or a local dry cleaner. But companies are using this exact specific permit to get the legal authority to begin construction and operation of massive AI facilities with absolutely zero public notice requirement. No heads up, no town halls, and no avenue for public input whatsoever. The obvious question then is, are our current regulatory processes actually sufficient to handle this? According to the experts, the answer is a resounding no. Catherine Gura, a former regulator at the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, noted that the sheer speed of this AI expansion is completely outpacing the agencies meant to protect the public. These environmental agencies are already dealing with massive, years-long backlogs. Some enforcement cases are literally a decade old. This makes it incredibly difficult, if not impossible, for them to properly vet these rapidly expanding megafacilities. Critics point to a highly intentional three-step strategy utilized by these big tech companies. Step 1, secure that low-level permit, or just argue that your gas turbines are merely temporary. Step 2, start operations incredibly quickly with zero public notice. Step 3, once the massive facility is actually built and operating, then you go ahead and apply for the massive expansion permits. By that point, the infrastructure is so deeply entrenched that it is virtually impossible for local communities to stop it. It's a very clever, small first, big later strategy that effectively completely bypasses public scrutiny. Section 5. The Jevons Paradox. Efficiency versus demand. Now, you'll very often hear the tech industry defend themselves by saying, hey, the newest generations of AI chips are becoming much more energy efficient. And sure, when it comes to power and heat per calculation, they are. So shouldn't that mean we'll eventually need fewer of these massive gas plants? Well, I was genuinely surprised to learn that history tells us the exact opposite. Let's go all the way back to the 1860s. England was terrified of running out of coal. People naturally assumed that as coal engines became more efficient, less coal would be used overall. But in 1865, economist William Stanley Jevons proved that increasing efficiency actually makes the resource cheaper and more useful, which in turn skyrockets overall demand. It's called the Jevons Paradox. Today, we are seeing the exact same thing play out with AI. The chips are getting more efficient, which makes AI cheaper and infinitely more widespread. This means the absolutely explosive growth in AI usage is entirely erasing those efficiency gains. The demand for power isn't dropping, it is only going up. Section 6. A problematic future regarding heat, water, and secrecy. We have focused a lot so far on electricity and air pollution. But as we step back to look at the broader, systemic consequences of this rapid expansion, we see that the physical footprint of the AI industry touches almost every single vital resource in these communities. So the crucial point is that those tens of thousands of high-powered chips get incredibly hot and require massive closed-loop cooling systems. By some estimates, the data center boom could increase the entire state of Texas's water usage by a whopping 9% by 2030. Furthermore, all that concentrated industrial equipment creates local heat islands, potentially raising nearby ambient temperatures by up to 2 degrees Celsius. And remember, all of this is wrapped up in a thick blanket of non-disclosure agreements, leaving communities completely legally blind to what is happening right across the street from their homes. We've been promised an absolutely incredible future by the builders of artificial intelligence, right? A future of cured diseases, solved problems, and clean energy. But as we've seen on our journey today, the machines building that very future are currently relying on some of the dirtiest power sources imaginable. They are operating in secret, utilizing regulatory loopholes, and causing real physical harm to real people in our communities right now. So I want to leave you with this final thought to ponder the next time you casually ask a chatbot a question. Can we build a promised AI future without breaking the present? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.